How different Star Trek TNG would be if Tasha Yar never died blows my mind. The death of Lieutenant Natasha Tasha Yar in Star Trek The Next Generation remains one of the show's most shocking early moments, a bold swing in Season 1 that signaled the series wasn't afraid to take risks. But it's also the kind of decision that invites endless what-ifs. Tasha's exit in Skin of Evil felt abrupt, tragic, and brutally meaningless, especially for a character whose backstory hinted at so much potential. And when you look across TNG's 7 seasons, and even into Star Trek Picard, it becomes clear just how profoundly the show would have changed had she remained alive. Imagining a TNG where Tasha Yar never died isn't just fun fan speculation. It rewrites character arcs, commander dynamics, and even the tone of the series. It threatens Worf's trajectory, strengthens Data's emotional journey, reshapes key episodes, and drastically alters the moral exploration at the heart of the franchise. Ultimately, the ripple effects are so large that it's almost impossible to imagine TNG as we know it. And honestly, the version where Tasha survives might have been just as compelling, and in some ways, even better. Here's how keeping Tasha Yar alive would have blown TNG wide up. 1. The Enterprise D's command structure would look radically different. Tasha's role as Chief of Security was one of the earliest examples of Star Trek placing a strong, authoritative woman in a physically demanding command position. Her death paved the way for Worf to take over the job, but if she had stayed, the bridge dynamics would have evolved along a totally different path. Tasha was assertive, emotionally intense, and more impulsive than most Starfleet officers. Unlike Worf, whose approach to security came from Klingon honor and discipline, Tasha's came from lived trauma, growing up on the lawless streets of Turkana IV. That difference matters. Her presence would have meant a more human, instinct-driven approach to security, leadership decisions influenced by survival rather than tradition, more conflicts and compromises between her and Captain Picard, more ethical debates between her and Riker, who admired her boldness. With Tasha on board, Worf never becomes security chief. That alone changes his storyline and the tone of the show in massive ways. 2. Worf's entire character arc would shift, maybe even for the worse. It's impossible to imagine TNG without Worf as the face of Starfleet-Klingon relations. His rise from junior officer to the iconic warrior diplomat we know today begins when he steps into Tasha's job. Without that opportunity, his character development slows dramatically. Instead of commanding the Enterprise's tactical systems and running security, he would remain a bridge officer with no major department to lead. This likely means no quick path to lieutenant commander, less involvement in Klingon political storylines, a smaller role in episodes like Sins of the Father, Redemption, and Parallels, a weaker foundation for his eventual transfer to Deep Space Nine. Keeping Tasha alive might have diminished one of Star Trek's most beloved characters. And yet, it also could have opened new doors for Worf. Without the weight of the security chief role, he might have pursued a more personal arc earlier, perhaps mentoring Alexander, or stepping into diplomatic roles long before DS9. Still, it's hard not to imagine that Tasha's survival would have come at the cost of Worf's legendary rise. 3. The Data-Tasha relationship would become one of Trek's most fascinating emotional arcs. The Naked Now gave us one of TNG's most memorable and controversial character moments, Data and Tasha's romantic encounter. Many dismiss it as a fluke, a one-off caused by intoxication. But later episodes and even Picard show that the connection meant something to both of them. If Tasha lives, that dynamic unfolds slowly and in richer, more profound ways. Data's interest in humanity would be deeply influenced by Tasha's emotional guidance. Tasha might become Data's closest confidant, even above Geordi. The relationship could challenge Starfleet norms, exploring intimacy with artificial life long before Measure of a Man. Data's quest for understanding human emotion would have a tangible anchor in Tasha, not just an abstract desire. Imagine The Offspring. Instead of Troy guiding Data through parenthood, it could be Tasha, connecting the cycle of survival she escaped to the family she could help Data create. Her presence would fundamentally change Data's journey from machine seeking humanity to machine inspired by humanity. For the tone of the early seasons would be sharper, darker, and more grounded. Season 1 and 2 of TNG often feel uneven, partly because the cast was still settling in. Tasha provided something the ensemble lacked: grounding realism. She treated danger like danger, not a puzzle to be solved. Her background, surviving rape gangs, lawlessness, and starvation, was the darkest origin of any Trek character at the time. The writers used it sparingly, but had she stayed, we almost certainly would have seen more episodes exploring Federation worlds that aren't idyllic, sharper social commentary on violence, trauma, and recovery, storylines that challenged Picard's diplomatic ideals. Instead of leaving these angles behind after Skin of Evil, the show could have carried them into its golden era, creating natural tension between Tasha's survival instincts and the utopian ideals of Starfleet. She was the perfect character to question, is the Federation truly as civilized as we want to believe? Several key episodes would look completely different. When you go back and examine TNG's major episodes, you'll realize how many depended on Worf or on the absence of a security chief with Tasha's personality. Here's how some episodes might dramatically change. The Measure of a Man. Tasha testifying on Data's humanity would transform the trial. Her personal intimacy with him gives her stake far deeper than Riker's or Picard's arguments. The episode becomes not just ethical, but deeply emotional. Hugh Hu, facing the Borg with Tasha still alive, would add emotional intensity. She would push harder for aggressive defenses and openly challenge Picard's initial reluctance to engage. Yesterday's Enterprise. This one is huge. The entire emotional weight of Tasha's return in this episode and her alternate timeline sacrifice only exists because she died. If she never died, the episode either doesn't exist or has to reinvent itself entirely. That means no Sela storyline in later seasons, no multi-season arc involving Romulan politics, no closure for Tasha in one of Trek's most brilliant time travel episodes. Ironically, saving Tasha might erase one of Trek's greatest character moments. Redemption. Worf's Klingon arc doesn't happen the same way because he never becomes a central figure in Klingon politics. Tasha's interactions with the Klingon Empire could open entirely new storytelling routes, perhaps giving her a diplomatic role rather than a purely tactical one. Tasha could become one of the most progressive characters in Trek. As TNG progressed, it became more comfortable exploring trauma, healing, morality, and identity. A surviving Tasha Yar would have been the perfect character to examine these themes through. Over 7 seasons, she could evolve from a hardened survivor to a mentor for troubled youth like Wesley, a voice of caution against Starfleet naivety, a symbol of how trauma doesn't define you but shapes you, a leader whose compassion is earned, not assumed. Imagine her later season episodes focusing on returning to Turkana IV, not as a victim, but as a Starfleet officer confronting the world she escaped. She could have become one of Star Trek's boldest, most nuanced figures, representing the strength needed to break cycles of violence. 7 Star Trek. Picard would change completely.